I was folding the towels when I heard Clara, Michael's wife, in the living room, fuming. "That's not the point," she growled. "We're drowning in bills, stress, and she just sits there, all day, like a piece of trash. Dead weight." I froze. The towel fell from my hand and slid to the counter. Dead weight. I heard it clearly. I walked to the door, my voice soft but firm. I heard it. Clara was startled. Michael turned around, his face pale. "Mom, it's not like that," he stammered. "It's like that," I said, not taking my eyes off him. I just didn't think I'd hear it. No one said anything more. I went back in, folding the last towel with shaking hands, but my heartbeat was slow, steady, and strong, because I had lived through worse than words. But there were words that stayed. That night, I made soup as usual, but when I brought it to the table, my hands shook from the pain in my knees and the bowl tipped, spilling soup onto the tablecloth and into Clara's lap. "Seriously?" she hissed. "I'm sorry." I reached for a napkin, but before I could touch the table, Clara slapped my hand away, then slapped me across the face. The room fell silent. Not the slap that hurt, but the silence that followed. Michael said nothing. He didn't scold his wife, didn't ask why, didn't say a word in her defense. He just looked at me, and then away, and I knew he wouldn't stand by me. Never. The door swung open, and my youngest daughter stood there. She had just come from a long way away, suitcase in hand, tears still streaming down her face. I knew he had just signed the divorce papers. 3 days ago, he called me, crying so hard he couldn't breathe, and saw my cheeks flushed, the soup spilled, me huddled together as if trying to hold on to my last shred of decency. He looked at Clara. There was no hesitation, and slap echoed. Clara staggered back, stunned. "You dare touch my mother again, and I'll break both your arms," Anne said through gritted teeth. Michael sprang to his feet. "What right do you have? You don't live here. Don't be a false hero." Anne turned around slowly. "And what about you? You stood there, letting your wife slap your mother, calling her a burden, and you kept quiet like a coward." "She didn't help," Michael screamed. "She just took up space. Just like you, a divorcee who runs home crying to her mother when life gets tough," and backed away as if she had been punched in the heart. "It's all the same," he said, scornfully. "Useless." I stood up. "Enough," I said. We both stood still. I looked at Anne. "You're not useless." Then I turned to Michael, my voice as calm as ever. "And I am no longer your son." His mouth opened, then closed. No words came. I walked away. I sat down in the chair by the window where they used to say I sat, staring into the distance like a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was very much alive, and I was so tired. There was a time when I believed, if you give enough, people will be grateful. If you are silent enough, people will appreciate. If you sacrifice enough, one day you will be loved. I was wrong. I sold my house where I had lived since Michael was 9. The porch was peeling, the pipes were often clogged, but it was mine. Bought with every night shift, every old dress I sewed, every year I missed a vacation. When Michael and Clara needed a new house for their growing family, I transferred the money without question. I didn't ask for it to be in their name. I just wanted my grandchildren to have a home. Then I moved into what I called the living room, a small room between the laundry room and the garage. No windows, a mattress on the floor. I told myself that was enough, as long as I was near the grandchildren. I took them to school, cooked, washed, rocked them to sleep, soothed their fevers, sewed buttons, made porridge. Didn't ask for a penny. Then I saw the final warning on the table, the bank loan. Michael said it was just a hard time. I paid it silently, half the rent every month. Didn't say anything. I was ashamed of her. Clara was different. At first it was just a glare, then a sneer. "Stop telling old stories. It's confusing the kids." Then "We need more space if that room is empty. We can make it a playroom." Then she eats, uses electricity, water, and doesn't pay a cent, and Michael looks away. I still try. I bake her favorite cakes, wash her forgotten shirts, sew dresses she left in the washing machine. And here, not all families are willing to take you in. No, I wasn't taken in. I was a home. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not to cook, not to fold laundry, to call the bank. I spoke to a polite clerk, the kind of sweet voice one would use when someone is reading money that doesn't belong to them. "Yes, Mrs. Harper. According to the records, you've paid off most of your mortgage since July. There was also a large transfer in December of last year, Yes, I said. Do you want to continue making your payments? No, I said, my voice even. I want to stop. Today. A pause. I also want all communications, bills, and financial obligations to be transferred to the two owners, Michael and Clara Harper. Yes, I'll get that done today. Good, I said. Please email me a confirmation. 2 hours later, I printed out the bank letter, along with the receipt for the final payment, folded it, put it in an envelope, and placed it right next to the salt shaker in the middle of the dining room table. Then I made dinner. Lentil soup, Michael's favorite as a kid. I baked the cookies, cleared the table, and set out 3 sets of cutlery. The usual. When they got home, I smiled and greeted them as if nothing had happened. Clara threw her shoes on the floor. Michael was still glued to his phone. Dinner passed in silence. The only sound was the clinking of spoons and bowls, and the ticking of the clock. When the food was almost gone, I picked up the envelope and placed it on the table, right between us. What is it? Clara asked, not looking up. I wiped my hands on a napkin. It's the final mortgage payment. I'll pay it. She blinked. What? I called the bank this morning. From now on, everything will be sent directly to you, to the real owners. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Michael raised his head for the first time during the meal. Mom, I heard, I said, my voice low. Last week, in the living room, Clara said I was a surplus. Clara interrupted. I didn't mean yes, I interrupted. And today, I decided to get rid of that surplus. Michael blushed, looking down at the table. I've paid for this house for 3 years, half the mortgage, the deposit, the groceries, the roof, the plumbing, the ceiling fans. I cooked, fed the kids, stayed up when the kids had a fever, washed clothes, sewed shirts. I bent down, picked up the small suitcase that was next to the chair, set it up. But now, the giver won't give anymore. Clara stood up, her voice shrill. You can't just leave like that. What about the kids? You can't just. I can, I said. And I will. Michael was like the boy he'd been, wide-eyed, pale, unsure of what to say. Mom, please, talk. I turned to look him straight in the eye. You let her slap you, I said softly. Called you all those horrible names. And when your brother stood up for you, you called him trash. You sided with the wrong person over and over again. Tears glistened in his eyes, but no words came. I'll leave tomorrow morning. The lock will be left on. That room, you can make of it whatever you want. But where are you going? He whispered. I smiled. Where I'm not a burden. I dragged my suitcase back to my room, climbed the stairs, pack a few sweaters, a photo album, and my husband's watch, who died more than 20 years ago. That night, I slept the deepest I'd slept in years. The next morning, before sunrise, I made coffee one last time in the kitchen that was no longer mine. I left my keys on the table. No notes, no instructions, just a dry click of the front door, and a silent departure. No one knew where I was going. No one saw me off, but I knew I was walking toward freedom. I told no one where I was going. I took only the essentials. A week's worth of clothes, my pension papers, my family register, the jar of recipes my mother left me, and a picture of the 2 kids, Michael and Anne, sitting in the backyard, their faces covered in watermelon juice, their smiles never knowing betrayal. I left my keys on the table. Next to them was a cold cup of coffee. At 5:40 a.m., I dragged my suitcase down the quiet street. The wheels rattled on the sidewalk. A neighbor watering his plants waved. I waved back. He didn't know I was gone. The Greyhound bus arrived on time. The leather seats were cracked. The air smelled old, but it was much more pleasant than the house. I sat by the window, watching the city recede behind me, where I had lived like a shadow in my own son's house. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to cry about. I walked through the quiet green hills of Georgia, toward the sunny south, where Anne lived. The last time we spoke, she was crying on the phone. Mom, I don't think I can take it anymore, but I don't know how to leave. I recognized her voice, the voice I used to have, years ago, when I was suffocating in my marriage and pretending to be okay. When we got to Florida, there was something different in the air, softer, warmer, as if whispering, welcome home. I dragged my suitcase down 2 blocks to the small apartment complex where Anne lived. The walls were beige, the railings chipped, cracks running down the hallway. I climbed to the 2nd floor, knocked twice, and waited. The door opened. Anne stood there, stunned. Mom? She whispered. She was thinner than I remembered. Her eyes were dark. Her lips were slightly swollen with faded lipstick. But what broke my heart the most were her eyes, the look of someone used to living in fear. No wedding rings. We said nothing, just hugged, tightly, for a long time. The hug that only those who have been broken know how to give. No words, just warmth. The apartment had only one bedroom, old furniture. The air conditioner was rattling, but it was clean, cozy, and real. "Mom, will you eat porridge with me later?" Anne asked, wiping her tears. I nodded, sat down at the kitchen table. She made tea, her hands shaking. There were no questions like, "Why are you here, Mom?" No reproaches, no need for justifications. We sat across from each other holding hands. Just that was enough to know the two women, mother and child, had both survived. Anne didn't say much in the early days. She walked around the house as if avoiding someone invisible. Every time the phone rang, she was startled. He locks the door twice a night, even when he's in his own apartment. I don't ask. I cook, fold, mop, leave little notes on his coffee cup. "You did a good job. I'm proud of you." One night, it's raining lightly. We're sitting on the old sofa. He looks out the window and says softly, as if afraid someone will hear, "He calls me trash." I turn, but he doesn't look at me. Not just when we argue, all the time. When I do something wrong, when I cook late, when I speak too softly or too loudly, even when I breathe. His hands are clenched into fists, white. He took my car keys last month, said I didn't deserve to go out, that if I left, no one would want me, not even you. He looks up at me. "Do you think he's right?" I squeeze his hand. "No, he's wrong, always wrong." His lips trembled, but he said nothing. He just threw himself into my arms, like when he was little, afraid of thunder and lightning. I held him, stroked his hair, and said softly, "If you can't leave yet, I'll be here. And if you need me, I'll carry you away." Time passed slowly in that small apartment. Anne went to work the evening shift at a restaurant, coming home smelling of grease and with dark circles under her eyes. I got up early to cook porridge, fold clothes, and tuck handwritten notes into her coat pocket. Every day that passes, you are one step closer to freedom. We were in no hurry. We did not force ourselves to forget, because real wounds need time and space to heal. One morning, Anne sat in a chair, holding a thick envelope. Her hands were shaking. "Divorce papers," she said softly. I signed them. I looked at her for a long time. Then I stood up and hugged her. "Are you sure?" She nodded. For the first time in years, her eyes were not downcast. "It's time," she said. "I don't want to be a survivor anymore. I want to live." I took her hand. "We will live together." We found our new apartment by chance, a small place above a seafood restaurant, one street from the beach. The walls were painted patchy, the faucets squeaked occasionally, but the morning sun shone through the windows, gentle as a promise. Anne stood at the window, holding the lease, her hands still shaking. "Are we really doing it, Mom?" I put my hand on her shoulder. "We're doing it." A week later, we moved in. No truck, not much stuff, just a few bags of clothes, a kettle, 2 folding chairs, and an old sofa that smelled of cinnamon. We didn't bring the past. We only brought ourselves and the parts that were still intact enough to love. A new life began. Anne resumed her passion for crafts, something she had done in college. She made bracelets, cards, mason jars with poems and beach sand. I helped pack and label. We set up a folding table in the corner of the living room. We called it Mother and Daughter Goods. Not many orders, but each one was a belief, a slice of freedom, wrapped by hand and with love. I started baking again, butter cookies, banana chips, buttered bread rolls, and posted pictures online. People around the area ordered. An old lady selling bread said, "This cake tastes like home." I laughed, because it's baked from what's left after I lost everything. Every morning, I made tea, opened the window, wrote in my diary not to remember, but to let go. I wrote about the smell of the sun on Anne's shoulders, about the sound of the waves at 6 a.m., about her laughter. Coming back to her, Anne drew again. She bought a new sketchbook, sketched the sea, the fish, her hands, the shadows of the sun on the floor. His paintings were hung all over the apartment, as if to remind us, we are alive. In the evenings, we sat on the floor, eating boiled vegetables and grilled fish. Some days it was just rice mixed with sesame salt, but it was still surprisingly delicious. No one mentioned Michael, or Clara, or that house, because there was no need. One night, I was folding my notebook when I saw Anne asleep on the sofa, head tilted, lips parted, cheeks rosy, the sleep of someone who knew she was safe. I looked at her for a long time. My heart softened. I knew I had done the right thing, not just because I left a house, but because I had stepped out of the silence. I was no longer the person who was needed only when the kitchen was cold, no longer the shadow creeping around during family meals, no longer the person who should be grateful to still have a place to live. I was a mother. I was a woman. I was alive. I still have the right to continue writing my life. Tuesday morning, Anne was in the kitchen making soup, humming an old refrain. I sat by the window, pruning the wilted leaves from the basil pot. The phone rang. A familiar number came up. The same area. A number I knew by heart but hadn't seen in a long time. I was speechless. Didn't pick up. A few minutes later, Anne's phone rang. Same number. She glanced at me. Didn't say anything. Just pressed the listen button and held it away on speaker. Michael's voice rang out, hoarse, urgent. Mom? Anne, it's bad. A ragged breath. Clara and I, we were wrong. Gambling debts. Evicted. Everything's gone. Mom, please, call me back. The beep ended the call. Then another voicemail. Anne said nothing. Just picked up the phone, blocked the number. Then I put the phone down as if nothing had happened. I did the same. Not angry, not gloating, just a clear, resolute silence. Because that silence was the only answer they deserved. I didn't need to tell Anne because I knew she knew too. We had given them everything. Money, a house, strength, love, opportunity. We had waited for them to choose love, but they chose power. Now those choices were drowning them. And us? We had learned to swim without them. Sometimes I wondered, does Clara still have that voice when she talks to the delivery man? Does she ever look back at that kitchen and remember the woman who baked the cookies every morning? Does Michael ever stand in front of the pantry and remember the birthday cards he made with noodles when he was a kid? I don't know, and I don't need to know, because the past is now their baggage, not mine. Our lives go on. Every morning, Anne takes her flip-flops, though she always walks barefoot on the sand. I carry a notebook. Some days I don't write anything. We walk slowly by the sea, the wind blowing through our hair, the salt water touching our toes. No talking, no need to talk, because being together is healing enough. Anne laughs more, sings while she cooks. The bruises on her arms have faded, but I know there's still pain inside. And me? I grow more rosemary on the balcony, send out handmade cake recipes to people who order online. I sleep soundly, without waking up, drink tea, just to enjoy, not to forget. One day, a real letter arrives. The envelope has a stamp. A heart is scribbled in the left corner. From Lily, my niece. Grandma, I hope you are happy. I miss you. I miss the smell of cookies. I miss your hugs. I told Mom and Dad. Mom cried. Dad went out. I hope to see you again. Love you, Lily. Below the letter was a drawing. Two people were holding hands in front of the old house. One of them was smiling brightly. I didn't cry. Not then. I just held the letter to my chest, letting myself feel every clumsy handwriting, every effortful spelling mistake. That night, when Anne was fast asleep, I quietly read it again, and cried, not because I was sad, but because it was time to cry, not for anyone else, but for myself. I cried for the years of silence, for the slap in the kitchen, for the word burden that cut deep into my chest. I cried for Lily, because children are always the ones who carry the scars of adults. But I don't regret leaving, because now I know, it wasn't about leaving, it was about choosing to live. The next morning, I woke early, not because I was nervous, but because I had something to write. I made tea for Anne, a nameless habit that had become a habit. I put the cup on the table with a slice of banana cake. Then I sat down at the little table by the window, pulled out Lily's letter, and opened it again. I read slowly. Each word was like a whisper of her voice, small, clear, and full of love. Then I picked up my pen and began to write again. Not like a grandmother who had been abandoned, but like a grandmother who was still alive, really alive. Dear Lily, I miss you so much. The cookies I made still smell like they did when you were little, buttery and cinnamony, soft in the middle, crispy on the edges. I still bake them every week, not for anyone to compliment me, but because the smell warmed my heart. I live by the sea, Lily. The sand is soft, the wind is salty, and the seagulls were ridiculously greedy. They always took her bread, though they never thanked her. Here, she grew herbs, made cakes, and walked barefoot on the sand every afternoon with Anne. She painted, and she wrote in her diary. We weren't getting old, we were growing again, in a new way. She didn't mention the old house. She didn't mention your parents. Because it wasn't your fault. Because you deserved to take only good memories, hugs, the smell of bread, the lullabies at noon. Because you were young, and children shouldn't be the ones to carry the voids adults leave behind. Before I folded the letter, I took a dried violet picked the day Anne and I walked by the sea. I put it in the letter gently, a small promise unspoken. I signed it, to Lily with all my love. Then I put a stamp on it and put it in the mailbox, standing there for a few minutes, listening to the soft click of the letter, like a door to the past closing gently. From that day on, I didn't wait for another call, didn't wait for a reply. I just lived. We sold cakes and handwritten cards to visitors. Those who stopped by the seafood shop downstairs would often come up and buy a bag of butter cakes from the lovely old lady upstairs. Anne drew more pictures. She called them ordinary days. She said, "Mom, I don't need miracles. As long as each day is pain-free, I know I'm living right." I understood. And I agreed. In the evening, we sat on the porch, playing old music, telling stories. I told Anne things I hadn't dared to say before. The time I almost ran away from the hospital because I was afraid of the bill, the time I cut my painkillers in half to save for the week. She didn't ask, "How did you do it?" She just held my hand and listened. We are two women who were once silenced, but not anymore. Now, we tell, we write, we live with a voice. Early one morning, while I was making tea, Anne came running in holding a postcard. There was no return address, just a scribble. "I saw your cakes online. I asked my mother to buy them for me." She nodded. "I thought you should know. I still remember the smell of cinnamon in your hair. I still remember the hug on a rainy day. Love, Lily." I don't need anything more, because what hurt me wasn't what they said. It was the moment I believed they were right. But now I know, I am not a burden. I am a mother, a memory, a love that once saved a child, and now is saving itself. You know, there are women who have been called burdens, but they are the ones who light the fire, the hands that hold our sleep, the only place in this world that always waits for us to return. They don't need anyone to apologize. They just need to be heard. If you have ever been a mother, a daughter, a grandmother who has lived silently, suffered, shed tears in silence, tell your story. Because here in Mother Tells Everyday Stories, we believe that seemingly small things can move a stranger's heart. Send them to us via email, mekechuyendoithuong@gmail.com. And if you see a part of yourself in today's story, don't forget to subscribe, share the video so that more people can see themselves. Because once a woman stands up, the whole world will have to listen.